Luxembourg City Strasbourg The European Union. The EU and European citizenship were established when the Maastricht Treaty came into force in 1993. The EU traces its origins to the European Coal and Steel Community and the European Economic Community, established, respectively, by the 1951 Treaty of Paris and 1957 Treaty of Rome. The original members of what came to be known as the European Communities were the Inner Six: Belgium, France, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and West Germany. The communities and their successors have grown in size by the accession of new member states and in power by the addition of policy areas to their remit. The United Kingdom became the first member state to leave the EU on the 31st of January 2020. Before this, 3 territories of member states had left the EU or its foreigners. The latest major amendment to the constitutional basis of the EU, the Treaty of Lisbon, came into force in 2009, containing some 5.8% of the world population in 2020. The EU had generated a nominal gross domestic product of around $15.5 trillion United States dollars in 2019, constituting approximately 18% of global nominal GDP. Additionally, all EU countries have a very high Human Development Index according to the United Nations Development Programme. In 2012, the EU was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Through the Common Foreign and Security Policy, the Union has developed a role in external relations and defense. It maintains permanent diplomatic missions throughout the world and represents itself at the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, the G7 and the G20. Due to its global influence, the European Union has been described by some scholars as an emerging superpower. Since the end of World War II, sovereign European countries have entered into treaties and thereby cooperated and harmonized policies. The principal framework for this unification. The EU inherited many of its present responsibilities from the European communities, which were founded in the 1950s in the spirit of the Schuman Declaration. During the centuries that followed the fall of Rome in 476, several European states viewed themselves as translatio imperi, were thereby attempts to resurrect Rome in the West. This political philosophy of a supranational rule over the continent, similar to the example of the ancient Roman Empire, resulted in the early Middle Ages in the concept of a renovatio imperi. Medieval Christendom and the political power of the papacy have been cited as conducive to European integration and unity in the oriental parts of the continent. The Russian Tsardom, and ultimately the Empire, declared Moscow to be Third Rome and inheritor of the Eastern tradition after the fall of Constantinople in 1453. The gap between Greek East and Latin West had already been widened by the political scission of the Roman Empire in the 4th century and the Great Schism of 1054, and would be eventually widened again by the Iron Curtain before the enlargement of the European Union towards Eastern Europe since 2004 onward. Pan-European political thought truly emerged during the 19th century, inspired by the liberal ideas of the French and American revolutions after the demise of Napoleon's empire. The term United States of Europe was used at that time by Victor Hugo during a speech at the International Peace Congress held in Paris in 1849. A day will come when all nations on a continent will form a European brotherhood. A day will come when we shall see the United States of America and the United States of Europe face to face, reaching out for each other across the seas. During the interwar period, the consciousness that national markets in Europe were interdependent though confrontational, along with the observation of a larger and growing US market on the other side of the ocean, nourished the urge for the economic integration of the continent. In 1920, advocating the creation of a European Economic Union, British economist John Maynard Keynes wrote that a free trade union should be established to impose no protectionist tariffs whatever against the produce of other members of the Union. During the same decade, Richard von Coudenhove-Kalergi, one of the first to imagine of a modern political union of Europe, founded the Pan-Europa movement. His ideas influenced his contemporaries, among which then Prime Minister of France Aristide Briand. In 1929, the latter gave a speech in favor of a European Union before the Assembly of the League of Nations, precursor of the United Nations. In a radio address in March 1943, with war still raging, Britain's leader Sir Winston Churchill spoke warmly of restoring the true greatness of Europe once victory had been achieved, and mused on the post-war creation of a Council of Europe, which would bring the European nations together to build peace. After World War II, European integration was seen as an antidote to the extreme nationalism which had devastated parts of the continent. In a